Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, our region's longest-running public affairs program. Lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota are joining us today for a recap of the week's activities at the state capitol. This is your opportunity to call or email your legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, Tony Sertich. Lawmakers returned to the state capitol this past week following their Easter Passover break. With 1 month left in the session, it will be a sprint to the finish line. Today's show is an opportunity for viewers to ask questions to the lawmakers who represent you. Call the number on your screen or email questions to ask@wdsc.org. We're happy to welcome a veteran lawmaker to answer those questions this evening. Senator Carrie Ruud is a Republican from R-Breezy Point in the Brainerd Lakes area, representing Senate District 10. Welcome, Senator Ruud. Great to have you here with us this evening.
Oh, thank you. It's delightful. I always love it when you ask me to come on up, and my husband and I make a day of it, and we enjoy coming to Duluth and seeing the ships in the harbor and having a wonderful lunch. So thanks for having me.
Well, great to have you here. And it's just the two of us this evening, so we'll go back and forth, and the viewers will send us in questions. What I've been asking folks at the beginning of the program this year to just kind of get to know their elected officials a little better is, why did you run for office the first time? I know the Senate wasn't your first election, and so why did you run for office?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I have a real estate office. My husband and I are broker owners of Lakes and Leisure Realty, and I went to a city council meeting for a client about a garage issue. And I went to the meeting, and I was kind of surprised at how it was run. I was president of my local real estate association, so I was aware of how meetings, you know, the ebb and flow of meetings, and I was kind of surprised. So on Tuesday tour the next day, I said to my partners, well, what would you think if I ran for mayor? And they said, great. And by the time we were done with our Tuesday tour, they had my signs ordered and we were off to the races. So I did win my first election as mayor. Very enjoyable. After that, an open seat happened. And so I decided to run for the Senate. And I was very fortunate to win that seat.
That's great, and been around for a long time at the state capitol and really focused on issues around environment and natural resources, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit. But we're coming to you an hour before the governor is going to give his State of the State address. And so every year, generally, a governor will go in front of the legislature or somewhere in the state and talk about their priorities. What do you expect to hear from the governor tonight, and what do you hope to hear from the governor tonight?
Well, you know, I think it's the State of the State is always very important, and I'm sorry to be missing it tonight, but it's on a Sunday, and for Greater Minnesota legislators, that's kind of our sacred day. It's the one day of the week that we have with our families. And so it's the State of the State is really amazing because it's pomp and ceremony, and we march from the Senate chambers to the House chambers, and the Supreme Court justices come in, and it's really a wonderful time for everybody to be in the chambers together. So I will miss that. What do I expect from the governor? I'm hoping he talks about the unemployment insurance and getting that done. It's so vitally important for our businesses to do that. And I hope he talks about a vision for Minnesota, where we're going to go. We need, you know, the crime is so rampant down in the cities. It's really kind of a scary place to be right now. And I'm hoping that he has that vision for Minnesota, getting back to Minnesota nice and really putting Minnesota back where it belongs. We have so many issues going on right now, avian flu, getting our farmers back. So I hope he talks about a vision for a strong Minnesota.
Great, and you've been in that chamber before, and like you said, all legislators from both bodies in the chamber, the Supreme Court, all the constitutional officers show up. It's a year when all 201 seats are on the ballot of the legislature, the governor's office, and everybody's on the ballot. Does that tend to change things around the Capitol, it being an election year for everyone? Oh,
I think so. I think people are sometimes afraid to vote how they may want to vote because of an election, and that's really too bad. I always say that good policy is good politics, and if you vote for good policy, good politics follows that, and I think they sometimes forget that in an election year.
Makes sense. And so just want to remind folks, please call or email in any questions you have. We'll love to get to them. The first one I want to talk about is what you brought up is there was an issue that carried over. We've been talking about it every week, unemployment insurance tax that businesses have to pay because there's a deficit in the fund, and the state had to get a loan for those dollars that needs to be repaid. It's been coupled with frontline worker pay generally in some negotiations, and I know that the governor and the leaders of the two branches are meeting to negotiate that. You talked a bit about the importance of that. Where do you see there potentially compromise in making sure that the fund gets repaid, and what needs to be done to kind of unlock that frontline worker pay in your mind?
Well, we owe the federal government almost $3 billion, and every day that we don't pay it, it's $50,000 in interest. So we're getting to a point where it's really vital that we get it done. And if we don't do it, the businesses have to pay for it, which is really unacceptable. They shouldn't have to pay for that. We owe that money. We should pay that money. We in the Senate voted in February to pass the bill to pay back the unemployment. And it's been sitting there as an offer to the House since then. Last year, $250 million was appropriated for the hero pay. The House is now at $1 billion, and that's just not acceptable in the Senate. We have made offers, several offers. We said they could have the $250 and decide whom it went to. That was fine with us. I think we've even upped the ante some. I will tell you that we don't hear too much about hero pay from our constituents because they were all heroes. Anyone who made it through the pandemic, no matter what your job description was, whether you got to go to work or couldn't go to work, I think everybody's a hero. So trying to decide who gets that pay is really a difficult task. I'm not so sure I want to be the person that picks the winners and losers in that. But that's tied up with the UI insurance, and it should not be. We should just get UI done and then have a conversation about the hero pay at a later date.
And the unemployment insurance tax that needs to be paid by businesses, I believe the first payment would be on April 30th, which is within a week here.
Yep.
So
coming up soon.
Time is of the essence to get that done.
Absolutely.
All righty. So we talk about getting that done. We've talked about the over $9 billion surplus that is right now. About 2/3 of that is what is kind of referred to at the state capitol one-time money, and money that has come from the federal government for the pandemic. But I think what maybe viewers don't know is nothing really needs to get done this year because it's not a budget year. The state budget's for 2 years, and that already happened last year. And so there's this surplus of money, and there are different proposals on how to spend the money, tax rebates, different investments. But really, if the legislature came down and couldn't come to an agreement with each other and the governor at the end, nothing happens. Nothing shuts down. And so where do you see there to being impetus to get something done this legislative session?
Well, I sit on the Environment Committee. We passed our bill on Thursday. It has $1 billion in it. $1 million in it, and the House has $240 million in their bill. So I don't know at the end of the day how that gets conferenced out. I mean, they're so different. Everyone has their idea of, from the Walls checks to spending more money. I really have a different idea of how we should get there. It's hard to say that we have a surplus when we have so much debt. Mm-hmm. And in your own budget at home, when you have debt and you get the extra money, you pay your debt, right? Mm-hmm. And we have done for many years, even down to, I believe in the Plenty era, we borrowed from the cigarette tax when we had a deficit to balance the budget. We still owe $350 million of that we borrowed back in 2003, 2004. We have extra money now, let's pay the debt. We borrowed from the landfill account to balance the budget. We needed to pay it back. We borrowed from the counties, their SCORE grants for recycling. We have extra money, we should pay that debt. We borrowed from the school trust fund. We should pay that back. We borrowed from the environmental trust fund. We should pay it back. We have the ability right now to pay the debts that we owe and get on solid financial ground without creating new problems or new programs, spending new monies. Let's get on. I don't think this economy is going to last very long. You've seen the skyrocketing inflation. And so For me personally, I think we should pay the debts that we owe, fill all the pockets that we borrowed from, and then if we have extra money, we can give tax relief to the folks and give the money back. But I say pay our debts first.
Great. Well, thanks for that. We've got a few questions that have come in the door already, and this is one we've talked about, speaking of taxes, every week, is there's an effort afoot to change the taxes paid on Social Security for retirees. And I know it's a part of the Senate tax bill, and I know the House is talking about it as well. Do you have a position on eliminating the Social Security tax, the state portion of the Social Security tax?
So it's something I've been working on for 10 years, and we actually made some progress. I believe in 2015 we got some of it. It puts a big hole in the budget, and so I think we should do it on a graduated basis, do it proportionately. But I tell people I've been working on this so long that I think this year I have to recuse myself, because I started collecting Social Security this year, and I have to tell you that it was paying our taxes here on April 15th, it was very shocking to see that the taxes that we had to pay on our Social Security, which is, we already paid taxes on that money. And so I think it's vitally important. We have so many people that go to Florida and Arizona and Texas, and they're making that their home because their Social Security is not taxed in those states. We are one of only, I believe, 5 states that still taxes our Social Security. Several years ago, we took the taxes off of military pay because we still did that. That made a big difference on our military veterans retiring to our state. I think this would make a big difference. In my district, District 10, which is all of Aiken County has the highest median age of any county in the state of Minnesota. So for them, this is a big deal, and we need to get it done. We passed it off the floor, I think, a week ago in the Senate to make sure that happens. I think that's a good investment for Minnesota.
Great. And we're going to stick to the tax issue. Another viewer wrote in wondering if you know anything about the current state of the homeowner tax credits for solar energy. Do you know anything about that proposal?
I do not. I know it's been, it had some hearings in the tax committee. I'm not sure where it's at right now.
Great, and we'll be able to follow up for that viewer in the weeks ahead as well. Another question that came in, who's in charge of the committee that works with roads and bridges? Now, that's a little bit of a trick question because there's actually probably, I can think of at least a couple of committees that would be responsible potentially for road and bridge funding. And can you talk about who chairs the Transportation Finance Committee and probably the Capital Investment Committee as well?
Well, Senator Newman, and he's done an excellent job. He really watches that pocketbook really well. But some of the things also flow through the tax committee, through tax credits and that is Senator Nelson. And then, of course, the capital investments is Senator Bach. And one thing that I really appreciate about Senator Bach's leadership on the capital investment, he really believes in infrastructure projects. Good infrastructure project, roads, bridges, infrastructure for cities. And so I think we'll see a really good, robust capital investment bill, but it would be really solid projects.
Great. And so for that viewer at home, that would be Senator Newman, Senator Nelson, and Senator Bach from our region of the state.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. So speaking of chairing committees, you chair a committee as well, the Environment Committee. And so can you talk a bit about what you've been working on this year, what your Environment Committee's been working on?
Oh, we've had a really busy year. Some really good bills. I was really disappointed that some of them didn't make it into the Finance Committee. But we worked on, one of the things we worked on is Watercraft Education. You know, we do education for snowmobiles, for ATVs, for just about anything you can imagine we do education for. And we thought that now there's so many different users on the water nowadays. When we had the pandemic, everybody took to the outdoors, which is wonderful. Yeah. But we had the highest death rate on Minnesota waters in a decade this year because of all the users, more users. We had 130,000 fishing licenses, highest in 2 decades. So we have a lot of people on the water. And we worked with the boater industry and the DNR and many of the lake associations and put together a really comprehensive boater I say watercraft because if I say boater, everybody thinks I'm talking about boater education. No, 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 no. I want boater as in watercraft. Yep. And so we put together a really comprehensive program to make it an online program for folks and reciprocal. Many other states, we're one of the few states that doesn't do mandatory boater education getting into a boat. And so we made it reciprocal with other states. So we thought it was a very comprehensive plan. It did not make it over the finish line. I'm still hopeful because I think it's in the House bill. I think it's a really good thing to do, boater education, especially when we have a lot of wake boat user conflicts, and I think education could really help us through some of those conflicts when people have respect on the water. You know, it used to be Grandpa Ruud would take you out in the boat and he taught you etiquette. You go by a fisherman in your boat and go too fast, you're not using the boat again, right? So we had our elders that took us out and taught us really good, solid just etiquette, you know, plain kindness on the boat, what you do. We don't have that anymore, and so I thought this was a really good way to do that. Another issue that we had was the 4 walleye limit. It was brought to us by the guides, the DNR backed it, lake associations. On all of the special reg lakes, it's 4 walleyes. And we thought making it statewide made sense. You know, the fishing pressure right now on our lakes is amazing because we have these big wheelers, these big, you know, ice castle fish houses that are, it's like a home on the lake, right? But you bring them out and you're out there for 3 months, and it's kind of a 24/7 thing. And so we're really hammering our resource. And that and the social media and all of the, you know, you get a hot bite on a lake and somebody takes a picture and it's not hard to figure out where they are, right? And so then all of a sudden everybody goes there in the hot bite and you have 4 guys in the boat, they each take 6 walleyes, that's 24 walleyes, that's a lot of fish out of the lake. So I think 4 walleyes would be you know, a really smart idea. And I said, if you need more fish, take your kid, right? Put your kids in the boat, take your grandkids in the boat. Then you can get your limits and you'll be just fine. And the resource, it'll really help the resource. What else did we work on? Go ahead. No, the stop over salting bill. Okay. We have done a really great job in Crow Wing County educating our snowplow drivers and everyone else on how much salt and when to use it. And when the counties figure out how much money they save by using it at the right temperature and the right amount, they are really amazed. And sometimes the pocketbook is a little easier to hit someone with than the environment, right? I mean, if they see that I'm going to save a whole lot of money, they know it's not good to put salt in the lake or in your streams. But when they see how much money they save, and so we put together a program. The MPCA put together a nice online program. You could get certified. I actually went through the certification. They did not let me drive the snowplow, though. I'm sorry. Yet. Yeah. There you go. Yes. But it was really a good program, and so we want to also hit all of the like apartment buildings and that type of thing. So that they know you go down, and now that everything's melting, you see all the salt on the sidewalks, and it has to go somewhere. Yeah. And it goes into our lakes and streams and rivers. And 1 tablespoon of salt permanently pollutes 5 gallons of water. So that was something else that we really worked hard on.
That's great. Well, another issue that is around the environment and natural resources is the legacy funding. And just to remind the viewers back home, back in 2008, I believe, the state of Minnesota, the voters of Minnesota, on the ballot, a constitutional amendment was passed to dedicate a portion of the sales tax, increase it, and dedicate it to what is called legacy funding. And so that is clean water, the outdoors, recreation, and the arts. And so every year— And
parks and trails.
And parks and trails, thank you very much, yes. And so every year, and every other year, the legislature gets together, and that's a dedicated amount of money that can't be spent on anything else. And so that's a piece of the work that you all do as well. Is there some legacy funding that is on track potentially for this year as well?
Well, we have, last year we had $700 million to spend, and it was just exciting to have that much money to spend. And we did a really good job. In the Senate, we work really hard. I work hard. It's really a bipartisan bill, and we work very hand in hand with our partners to make sure that we spend it constitutionally. And I've been in charge of it for the last 6 years, and we've made some really good structural changes that I think have really helped. We have a 5% holdback in every fund. So when we came into the pandemic, our projects were all just solid. Nobody went by the wayside. Our funds are just in great fiscal shape. We also made some changes structurally on how we fund small projects, because sometimes they don't have the fiscal ability to manage the grants. And it doesn't mean they shouldn't get the grants, they just don't have that ability. So we made them or had them go through a fiscal agent that can help them walk them through the grants so that they can get them. And it's worked wonderfully well. So last year was the funding year for the legacy. This year, everyone's getting their projects ready for next year. There is money this year because of the great sales tax. I think there's like $47 million. But we have, in the Senate, made the decision not to spend that money because we don't know what the economy will be like next year. And we want to make sure that everyone next year, when they come forward with their projects, will be able to be funded. So this year is the year the Lessart Sam's Outdoor Heritage piece gets funded every year simply because of how their projects work. And so that bill is, it passed, I believe, the House, and it's teed up to pass in the Senate. And all it is the Lessart Sam's. They worked on that. They do such an amazing job. Senator Lang walks around with this 3-ring notebook that, and they vet every project. They go through them all and they rank them, and they do an amazing job. And so that bill's all teed up, and along with some extensions because of the COVID, some of the projects didn't get to be finished on time. They just couldn't. And so we've done some extension of some dates for them so that they can their projects will still go forward. So I've been really amazingly blessed to be in charge of that and to be involved with so many wonderful folks around the state.
That's great. And just for our viewers at home, the Lessart Sam's Heritage Council is named after 2 former senators, and the commission is a group of folks from not just legislators, actually, citizens who are on that board who make recommendations to the legislature on funding those projects, correct? Correct,
and they do a lot of work. It's I sat on it early on when it was just LCMR, and then they changed it to LCCMR, and because they put a citizens group on, and their voice is really important in the recommendation process. So we really appreciate the fact that they're on that now, and it's a bigger council to going forward.
And these are citizens from across the state of Minnesota, and a lot of them have worked or have a special interest in the outdoors and recreation and those sorts of things. And so they're a little closer to the issues maybe than the legislature broadly would be.
Yeah, and while we're on the Lessart Sam, so we are trying to, there's another, the LCCMR, that is funded out of, the legacy is out of sales tax. Yes. LCCMR is out of the lottery in Lieu. The lottery, that expires in 2024.
The dedication of
the funds.
Yep. And that was a constitutional amendment back in the 90s,
yes,
correct?
And it passed 77%. And so now it's due to expire next year, the 2024. So what we are trying to do is get it on the ballot, pass it this year to get it on the ballot for 2024, because we think we'll need about 2 years to really educate the voters. It will be to renew the constitutional amendment. That's a big thing when you're talking about the Constitution, and we'll need a couple years really to educate the voters about what it is. Some people still, they might be new to it, haven't experienced it, and we want to make sure that we can show them what a wonderful job they've done of spending the money, the projects that it's gone for, and how it all works. But it's complicated, so we think we'll need some time to educate the voters, because we want them to be excited about voting for it and renewing it back in 2024 on the ballot.
That's great. Well, keep those questions coming in, viewers, either by email or by phone. Since we're talking about these different funds, and that's what happens is legislature passes bills that establish funds. The constitutional amendment, those funds have to be spent in that way. One fund that you talked about before was the Natural Resources Trust Fund. Can you, a viewer wrote in, can you explain a little bit more about what that fund is in particular and what it does?
So that's what funds the LCCMR.
Okay.
And what they do is the money from your lottery tickets is dedicated towards the Environment Fund. And that's something that we've been working on too with Senator Lessart. So it used to be 97% of that money went to the Environment Trust Fund to be spent on the projects. And there's been a mission creep, and now only 72% of that money goes. And so we have a bill in and we say, no, that's one of those things we need to pay back, right? We kind of took that money and it needs to go back into where the voters voted for it. Of that money, we call the lottery in lieu, and this is getting really into the weeds, but
that's all right.
The lottery in lieu is, we wanted to know how we paid for these projects. So we don't pay sales tax on the lottery tickets. And so this money, they pretend that they pay sales tax, and they take that money, it's called lottery in lieu money, and that's what pays for so many of the projects. It's kind of convoluted, but it really works, and it's dedicated, and that's what the people voted for. And so it really is a protection for that funds. Right now, there is a proposal that passed the Senate that I'm very much not in favor of. They want to take 1% of that money, which is dedicated toward the environment, and they want to put it in Explore Minnesota Tourism and use it to attract big sporting events. And I don't think anywhere in the constitutional amendment it talks about using the money for sporting events. It talks about using parks and trails and water and all the things that we love, but not big sporting events. So I think that's really, it's a tough thing for me to say yes to that, because I've been very protective of the dedicated funds. It's what I've pretty much spent my career saying, no, it's in the Constitution, you can't spend it for that. And so I'm hoping that this does not go any further. We shouldn't be spending the environment money on big sports teams.
Great.
They have the money to spend themselves, right?
There you go. So we're going to change gears a bit. You also serve on the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee. A very important issue in our state, in our region, and you spoke to the more senior population that lives, in particular, in the counties that you serve, and that's the case all across our region. One of our viewers wrote in to talk about a proposal for a constitutional amendment to dedicate funding for long-term care services, and is wondering if there's any chance of that passing this legislative session.
Well, I have not seen that bill come forward. I will tell you, putting something in the Constitution is a really big lift. We did that with the environment funds, and people wanted to do that. But, there's all sorts of ideas to put things in our Constitution to fund things, and it ties the next legislature to not be able to do things. And so that's a tough one. And I think that we should just be able to say that our seniors are worth it and that we should spend the money on them without putting it in the Constitution. I know they want to put education in, and they want to put dedicated funding for transportation, and pretty soon there's no general fund money left to do the daily work of the legislature and the state of Minnesota. I will tell you a kind of a fun story. So we worked with two ladies down in southern Minnesota. They followed our committee hearing, and one was 97, and her 75-year-old daughter took care of her, and they listened to every one of our committee hearings. And they were worried about getting the vaccine for themselves because they couldn't get out of their home. Neither one of them felt like they could leave. And so they listened into and sent us emails and talked to us the whole time we were doing the vaccinations for seniors. And 2 weeks ago, they drove themselves to the Capitol to come visit us. And they met with Senator Housley and myself in the office, and it was just delightful. We had a delightful coffee, and it was fun to actually meet someone, because for so long we saw people via Zoom, or we couldn't see them in person. So to meet these two delightful ladies who were so passionate about helping not only themselves to get the vaccination, but also other seniors. So it was kind of fun to actually meet them in person.
That's great, and the world seems to be opening up. The legislature and government seems to be opening up to the citizens more fully this session. Let's stick on this topic of long-term care, nursing homes. Folks are experiencing the crunch here. There's definitely a crunch in the workforce. We're hearing from anybody working in healthcare, but in particular working with our seniors, getting folks to do those jobs, which sometimes are very low-wage jobs, very high-stress jobs. What are you seeing as potential solutions, maybe not even just this session, but into the future? We know what the challenge is. Are you seeing any opportunity to try to help either on the workforce side of things or the funding side to make sure that these long-term care facilities are there for our seniors in our communities, nursing homes, and all the budgetary challenges they have?
Well, we had the opportunity, the federal government came in with dollars to train CNAs, Certified Nursing Assistants. And so Central Lakes College in Brainerd has a wonderful program. They do a great job. So we made sure that some of those dollars got to them for the training program, and really helped out with the tuition and getting more folks trained on the ground, because we are so, we're so short. In the Brainerd Lakes area, we have 4 different hospital situations, and so it makes it tough there in competition. We don't want them to be in competition for who pays the most. We want them to have a wide variety of people to choose from. So I think getting the money to our colleges, and especially our small colleges that can do a 2-year program, an 18-month program, get them out into the nursing field, I think has helped a little bit, but we are still short on that. So anything we can do, if we can give tuition forgiveness, or just to get folks back into the field, will help.
And that'll be an issue that'll be with us, I'm sure, for a number of years to come. A lot more questions coming in the door here, so I'll ask you one that pertains to transportation. What steps can the state take to reduce the cost of gas and fuel oil right now? Is there anything the state can do with the high gas prices, high fuel prices that we're seeing out there?
I don't think there's anything we can do at the state level. Some people have talked about the gas tax holiday, but when we look at how much our roads and bridges cost, if we take out the gas tax, we now have rated that fund, which is short anyway. We need every dollar that we can get to keep our road construction going and the jobs that creates going. So that is an issue that has been talked about, but I don't think it can. I think the thing that will get us going is we really need to get the pipelines open and flowing and be energy independent, and that's not something that we have the ability to do at the state level.
Another question, we're going to be bouncing around here
because
folks have different
it.
topics. Yeah. What is being done to create and protect the green spaces here in Minnesota? Are there any bills coming up that community members need to pay attention to?
I don't think I've seen anything for green spaces particularly, but I do know that in the Legacy and the LCCMR and in the bonding bills, we do look very hard at creating public spaces, state parks. We have the new park up in Vermilion and the Cuyuna Rec area. And so we are really trying to, I think you'll find in the LaSarte Sams, there's pieces where we know there's a piece of property that's really important to save, whether it's for hunting or a wildlife management area. So I think we are really focused on those pieces of property that we need to preserve for everyone. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a lake cabin or to have a piece of hunting land. And so we need to really have public lands so that everyone can enjoy all those things that they love to do and to recreate.
Great. And we're going to keep it on the natural resources topic here. And you also serve on the Mining and Forestry Committee. This one is natural resources related. The viewer wants to know, is protecting natural resources to offset climate change a concern of the Minnesota legislature? So maybe answer that question if you could, and maybe talk about it. Are there any proposals you're seeing coming through the Mining and Forestry Committee this year?
Well, Mining and Forestry is a policy committee, so it's kind of done for the year. We did look at some one piece that I think Senator Bach and Tomasoni are looking at, and we want more transparency in the permitting process so that everyone can look at where that permitting process is and what's being done. We sometimes look at it and see that we don't really know where that process is and what's going on, and I think that creates tension between folks who are on the mining side and the environment side, just to be honest. And so the transparency in the permitting, I think going forward, would be a really good idea. You could create a web-based program where people could go and see where we are in this permitting and what's happening and where are we going and how can I give my input. I think that would go a long way to ease some of the tensions.
Great. You talked about tensions around that. We could talk about tensions between Democrats and Republicans, especially in an election year. But more a broad question, we certainly hear about division and tension between Greater Minnesota and the metropolitan area. Do you see that around the state capitol? Is that an issue that sometimes issues maybe don't fall necessarily Democrat, Republican, maybe they fall rural, metro? And how much of that divide are you seeing that we may be hearing about on social media and in the news?
We see it a great deal, and I think one of the things that we need to do is educate folks. So on my environment committee, I think I'm probably the only one that hunts and fishes. I mean, it's just a different dynamic nowadays. And so when I talk about 4 walleyes, I have people that look at like a deer in the headlight. What are you talking about? And so we need to educate folks. We used to go on field trips. We used to take the school trust folks, and we take the folks from the cities and say, come on up and we'll show you what this is all about. And once they see what the issue is and how it affects Greater Minnesota, you have a greater understanding. And so I think that education between both Metro and Greater Minnesota is probably the key to that. But there is a big divide. We just live a different lifestyle. When the cities was all closed up and cloistered over the vaccine, in Greater Minnesota, we were living in a different world. We didn't do that. So it's a different point of view, and it's a different lifestyle.
And I think we've also certainly seen that in Greater Minnesota, Republicans have been more successful on the ballot, and in the Twin Cities area, Democrats. Do you think the issue is exacerbated then, that there is a maybe rural metro divide that you're speaking about that is then on top of that, it's Republican, Democrat geographically? Do you see there being an issue that's almost been twice as challenging of it's a geographic issue, and then laying on top of that it potentially being a partisan issue?
Well, I think there's an ebb and flow of politics that we are kind of not recognizing. So when I was elected in 2012, well, in 2003 also, I was out for 6 years, but I was the furthest north Republican in the state of Minnesota, in Brainerd. There was no Republicans north, right? And so then and I had 2 DFL housemates who I really, truly, we made a great team. We truly did. At Greater Minnesota, we all worked together. I had John Ward and Joe Radinovich, and we really made a good team for our district. But the district changed, and now it's all Republican. And now there's Republicans way north, all, the border cities. And so it has changed. Will it change back? I don't know, because there is an ebb and a flow of how districts look and how they act. So it's interesting, and just when people say they have a safe district, something changes, and it's not safe. Yep. Nothing is safe. You need to really serve your constituents well. And I think sometimes when people get in office, they forget that they represent all of the people in their district and not just the people that voted for them. And that's something that I think we need to get back to at the legislature. We'll function much better if we do that.
Sure, great. Have a question about property taxes. We were talking before we got on the air. Folks are getting their property tax statements, and we know that the state plays a role in that, but the primary role of property taxes is county, city, and school district. But this viewer just wants to talk about is there anything that the state and the legislature can do about property taxes in Minnesota, especially they're talking about it being difficult for senior citizens living on a fixed income.
It is difficult for seniors, especially in an area. I'll take, for instance, Crosby. Crosby's a mining town. There's a lot of seniors that live in their little, nice little rural homes. And now all of a sudden we have great development there because of the rec area. And so properties are selling at a rapid rate. We have 28 new businesses there. And so it's a marvelous redevelopment. But the property taxes are going up on everything except for the seniors who are in the same home that they've lived in for 30 years. And it's really difficult because they're at an age where they're on Social Security and we're taxing that, right? So that is a difficult conundrum to look at. What the state has, the involvement that we have is very little, and I don't want to push our local units of government under the bus because they work really, really hard at this. But we have very little. We have the homestead credit, which we are working on. We haven't looked at that homestead credit since 2011. And so Senator Weber is the property tax chair, and he's held a lot of hearings on that. And we're looking at how we can raise that because I think that would help the folks. There's also the piece where the appraisers have to be within 90 to 110% of the appraised value. We need to look at that number too. That's the state guideline. And so we're looking at that. How can we make that easier for the appraisers at the local level or the assessors to deal with that issue? Other than that, we really don't have a whole lot of to do with the local property taxes. Some people have thought about, freezing this or freezing that, but when you freeze one portion of the sales tax or the property tax, somebody else has to pay. So, and I also want to remind folks that just because your valuation went up, that doesn't mean that your taxes went up. So when in November, when your counties are looking at their levy rates, you need to be talking to them about they need to either keep them the same or they need to lower the levy rates so that your taxes don't go up. And by lowering that mill rate in living within their budget that they have now, I don't think we'll see the ginormous raise in property taxes. But I tell you what, when you see your valuation go up, you go, whoa, I live in a little house and it just went up $100,000, and don't I wish I lived in the Taj Mahal, but it's not true. So it is a difficult time for folks, but I think people should not get super excited until we get into the county budgets will be what we really need to pay attention to in November.
Okay, great. Another question from a viewer is about another issue in Greater Minnesota, and this question comes from north of Chisholm, and I just had to mention that, being from Chisholm originally. How is the Senate looking to address broadband issues currently being felt for those living in rural parts of Minnesota? Are there any bills coming forward this session for broadband?
Quite a few, and we're looking to do some funding. We're really trying to hit the unserved folks first, and then the underserved.
And can you talk about the difference of that? Because that is kind of at the crux of the issue, is unserved and underserved. Can you explain the difference?
So the unserved, they just simply don't have any resources or internet services or anything. They maybe live too far from town.
So no broadband
so
coming
no
to them at all.
broadband at all.
Okay.
And so they're very much at a disadvantage, especially if they have school children or they want to work out of their home. So we want to try to hit those folks first if we can. And then the underserved are the people that hopefully they don't hear the and they're dialing
the old modem,
the only modem and dialing up, and and so we want to hit those and get them up. But there's so many different services coming out there, with satellite. I mean, that's really come, it's been always hard in Greater Minnesota. The satellite hasn't always worked, but they've done amazing things with that now. So I just got internet to my house this fall, and otherwise I was hotspotting off my phone. So I really know the pain of not having internet, especially when you try to do a Zoom call that, now we do so much of our business that way. So we're very focused on getting, and so is the federal government, getting the broadband out there. It's almost like not having electricity. True. In those days, right?
Exactly. And so, and underserved, just to kind of round out the conversation, underserved is really the state set a standard that a certain rate needs to be available all across the state of Minnesota, and there are folks that are falling under those speeds of upload and download, and that's what we're talking about for underserved.
Correct.
Great. Alrighty. Capital investment bill. So this year, generally, that's the big topic. Now, when you have a $9 billion surplus and all of these outstanding issues and the follow-up from the pandemic, those tend to get in the way. But this is generally the year where the state borrows money at a low interest rate to pay for projects, capital investment projects all across the state of Minnesota that have some sort of regional or statewide significance. We talked just briefly about it. Senator Tom Bach, independent, who caucuses with the Republicans, is the chair of the committee from our region of the state. Can you talk at all about some of the projects you're looking to support for capital investment, and what sort of size bill would you like to see? That's the first conversation, usually like how big is the bill generally across the state, and then any specific projects you're looking to support either in your region or statewide.
So last year we passed the largest bonding bill in the state history. So do we need another ginormous bill? I don't know that. I have always said I'm not so worried about the size of the bill as I am the projects that it includes. So for my area last year, we didn't have any projects. We didn't need anything, so I didn't ask for anything. This year, we have some needs. The Brainerd water system very much needs an update. And it's an infrastructure project that's very necessary to the health and welfare of Brainerd. So that's one of the projects. I'm helping Representative Poston in his area with on the Gull Lake region. They have a sewer project that really needs to be addressed. I think, and we have one project that's really exciting in Cross Lake, and that's the National Loon Center. It's right on Cross Lake. It's on the federal dam site. What I love about it is the community has raised millions of dollars already to put towards that project. They've done a great job, and so now they're looking for some bonding dollars to finish it. So projects like that, I think, are really worthy of the bonding issues, and it's really infrastructure, roads, bridges. So it's not really for me the size of the bonding bill. It's really the projects that we put in there that really make sense. And we're going to have to look at the interest rates because the interest rates have really crept. Even as a real estate broker, we're looking at the interest rates on home mortgages that have gone up. So our capacity to bond might not be as large as we would like it to be because of the interest rates going up.
Great. And as a reminder, this bill is a special bill. It takes true bipartisanship. It takes both the Senate and the House are controlled by different political parties, but then it takes a supermajority to pass any borrowing the state does. And so a bill like this would need to get support bipartisan in both bodies of the legislature and get signed by the governor. How challenging is that in this political environment, and especially in an election year? Does it help that it's an election year, that people maybe want to bring home the bacon, or is it challenging because of the politics that might be at play?
Well, I think the Senate is not as challenging as it is in the House because it has to originate in the House. So it really has to pass the House first before it can ever come to the Senate. And usually by the time it comes to us, it's not such a big deal. But in the House, it originally has to pass, and it has to have a lot of the minority voting for it in order for it to get out the door. So the election plays a big part because you have the group that doesn't want to spend a nickel. They will vote against any bonding bill that there ever was on the planet. That's just who they are. And then you have the folks that really want their projects done for their community, and maybe they're up for re-election, so this is very important to them. So politics and the election really play a big part in that. But it does every year, right? Because the bonding bill always comes in the election year for the House.
Absolutely.
So.
We're gonna go back to fishing again. The opener is just around the corner. A viewer wrote in to talk about walleye limits again, and just wants to ask more broadly: how are issues like walleye limits determined generally? How does that come to be? The setting of walleye limits that the state does.
Usually, it's done by the DNR,
okay.
And they usually make the determination. This is a little different because it came to us from the guides and the lake associations, and the DNR has said yes, we would go ahead with this. And so it is a little different route than normally. It's kind of social versus scientific, but we think with all the changes out there, with the social media, with the wheelhouses, if the DNR does it, they have to go and do a scientific study, and then they have to bring forward the science of it, and we have to fund that study. So you're looking at, if we're going to change it, it could be 2 to 3 years. And we think right now, especially with AIS, the fry that we put in, we do a lot of walleye stocking around the state of Minnesota. And because of the clarity of the water is now warmer. And so the fry are not surviving as they did before. So we are looking at fingerling stocking. Well, that takes a little more time, and it's a lot more expensive. And so while we may have this lag for stocking, we just think it's prudent to do this. And so it's a little different route, I will admit to that. But we think it's, we have pretty much everyone on board. There's a few folks that say, you know, you have to wait for the science. But I think that it's the state fish, and it's such a valuable resource, we should protect it.
Great. And so the DNR can make recommendations. Legislature ultimately has final say on what that limit is?
No.
Okay. Then how does it work?
So they can change it. So
Okay.
they can go forward and say, in their fishing regulations, we are changing this to for walleye. They have done that on special reg lakes, you know, all around, and that's how it works. But they can, the legislature can say, we think this is a special situation, special response, and we need to have it done earlier and faster than you can do it.
Great. Another question from a viewer, back to mining. Would more robust Minnesota mining and U.S. reliance on mining from international resources be better? And so I think this is the issue around renewable energy, and I think President Biden just talked about this, getting more locally sourced projects, steel coming from U.S.-made steel in infrastructure projects, something the legislature in Minnesota has done from time to time. But this viewer wants to ask about more robust Minnesota mining to end the U.S. reliance on foreign mining. What is your position on that?
Oh, I think that's really important. And I think when we talk about mining in Minnesota, you know, I go over to Cuyuna, which is a wonderful place to swim and kayak. It's the cleanest water anywhere. You go up to the lakes up in the Iron Range, and they're the cleanest water and the clearest water. And I know that we know how to mine and take care of the resource. Minnesota's done it for years, and they're proud of how they do mining. And so I think that we should really get back to what we do best. But in saying that, I think that we always pit renewable against mining, against, you know, green energy, against oil, and I think our portfolio should be all of the above. That's how we move forward. We can't rely on just one or the other. It has to be a whole portfolio of all the above to get us where we are. We can have clean energy, and we can have oil, and we can do a good job with all of it.
Great. And we're past the point in session where generally new ideas can come in. It's really past what are called deadlines, where new ideas can't come. So it's all the issues that are before you right now. Do you foresee any changes around mining or natural resources happening this legislative session? Are you seeing anything out there?
I'm really not, and you're right, we are through our bill deadlines. The omnibus bills, we'll be on the floor all next week doing the omnibus bills, and that's all the bills that have made the deadlines. They've made the policy deadlines, the finance deadlines, and they've gone through the finance committee. And so unless something really comes forward that has to be done, that can be amended on the bill that everyone can agree to, we don't see a whole lot of new things coming forward unless it's an emergency on something.
Great. And you talk about omnibus bill, and so can you explain a little bit of what that is and why? And I got this question, actually, I was speaking to the Cloquet Chamber of Commerce leadership class. They asked the question, and I have a real live elected official here to ask too as well, why do they put all those bills together and not just vote on every issue individually and let it stand on its own? So I want to give you a chance to talk about the omnibus bills, and then why you as legislators don't vote on every single idea individually.
Well, and I think sometimes we put too much in the omnibus bills, and some of these ideas should really be vetted and voted on themselves, and I would have to agree with that. But so just in my policy committee, so I carry the DNR policy bill and the DNR lands bill, and they are not sexy and they're not exciting. They're just pretty kind of boring. We go through the DNR vets all the pieces of property that it needs to either sell or trade or whatever, and most people don't even know where those pieces are or what they're to do with, and so to have to vote on that individually would be very tedious for folks. And so now I want to say that the DNR policy bill is tedious, but it has a lot of just nuts and bolts and issues that just things that have to be done. They're not controversial. They just need to be passed so that the DNR can do their job. So we put those into I pass those out of my committee, we vet them very well, and they go into the finance committee, and they get tucked into that larger bill because they're not anything that people really need to pick apart and to vote. So a lot of what you see in the omnibus bills is really policy issues to help government run better. They're not controversial, they've been vetted, and it would take a very long time to do each one on its own.
But they have to have the same general subject to be in an omnibus bill.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That's correct.
Wonderful, great. A couple more questions before we wrap up. Is there any issue, and you've been around the Capitol for a long time here, as we get 1 month out to the end of session, is there any issue that you foresee that's been kind of below the radar that might be important that viewers aren't seeing on TV or reading about in the newspaper that might get done this year?
Oh gosh, you know, when you that's an interesting question. There could be something that bubbles to the top that everybody thinks is a really good idea. For me, I think that's not taxing Social Security. I think we pretty much vetted most of the issues that are coming forward. You'll see on the peripherally, you hear sports betting, you hear marijuana. Those issues, I don't see them coming forward this year. We haven't really had a good vetting on those issues. If we do have a good committee hearing, a good hearing on the floor so that everybody can talk about those. But the sports betting is kind of bubbling there in the background. And as a person, I don't know how I feel about that yet, but as a person that won their fantasy football league last year, I can't say really no, right?
Right. Good. Well, we're getting close to out of time. 1 month to go in the session. If you can think ahead to after you guys adjourn, what would you consider a successful session to look like? What would need to get done for you, Senator Ruud, for you to call it this session was successful?
Well, we talked about the capital investment bill, and I would really like to see a robust infrastructure bill come forward. I would also I don't think we need to spend more money. If we could pay down some of our debt and pay the UI and maybe give some tax relief, that would be a successful session.
Great. And 1 month left of the session, and just a couple of sentences. If folks want to get in touch with you, your constituents, what's the best way to get a hold of you these days as you're going to be, as you said, on the floor, voting on these bills and really stuck in the Twin Cities?
Well, I have an amazing staff, and they are truly, I couldn't do my job without them. And so if you call my office with a question or if you need something that needs to be looked at, my staff is more than happy to help. If you want an appointment, you can do that. I also have a really robust Facebook page, and I put on all sorts of things that constituents may need to know, like even so much as the free park day that we had yesterday. And so that's a really good way to know what's going on. And I also send out an email newsletter every week with what's happening at the Capitol. So if you call my office and talk to my staff, they can get you in contact with any of that.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it, and we are out of time. I would like to thank Senator Carrie Ruud for her time today, and join me again next Sunday for another edition of Minnesota Legislative Report, when we will welcome more legislators from northern Minnesota to the program. For the team at WDSC, I'm Tony Sertich. Have a great evening.